Well, let's go ahead and get started. As I said, I'm joined today by my friend and peer, one of the few people in this space that can say that they've been following the staffing and recruiting space longer than I have. Dave Colmorgan, sales director of the staffing and recruiting group at CareerBuilder. He's got over 17 years of industry experience. We're both knocking on 20. We both started when we were 14. If you're wondering how that math works out. This is where we've kind of grown up in this industry. We love it. We're passionate about it. He's led and grown teams across the CareerBuilder organization, runs the entire staffing and recruiting group, which actually services the entire staffing industry, but includes 95% of the top 150. And I would guess, I'm not going to put him on the spot, but I would guess that Dave knows exactly those two or three that aren't in that 150 that aren't using them, and he's working on that as well. So Dave, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks so much, Eric. Excited to be here, man.
This is always a fun chat for us. We get to really share data on the industry, and we also get to really give you kind of what we're seeing. As I mentioned, Dave works with literally thousands of different staffing firms. We run client and talent and internal staff satisfaction surveys for hundreds in the space. We run the best of staffing, client, talent, and employee satisfaction survey programs, the only programs that are built specifically to identify the top service providers in the space. You also may know us from clearlyrated.com. If you do a Google search in your local market for the top staffing firms, you're probably coming up with Clearly Rated on that first page or two. At least that's how it is in most of the markets. And our goal simply is to help staffing firms ensure that they have high levels of engagement, retention, and on the client side expansion, and making sure that the industry has a source to go to really identify who's delivering on their promises as a part of that. So we'll kind of go through that as a piece of it. But before we go any deeper, I want to have Dave talk a little bit about CareerBuilder and the approach and why you're a part of this study each and every year.
Yeah, and Eric, thanks for the introduction. Excited to be here, man. I know we're going on 15 years almost, right, of sharing this data. And I know we've said it before, but we are truly committed to this industry and this space. We see ourselves very much as a partner to the industry as well as the organizations that are on this call. We truly believe that high tides rise all boats, right? Like, this research is something that we've done for a long time. We want to share with the industry because we believe when our clients do better, and then the industry does better and CareerBuilder does better, right? And when we look at CareerBuilder as an organization, we have two customer bases, just like everybody on this call, right? We've got our clients, we've got our employers that we cater to, and everything that we've been investing in as an organization it addresses all of these things on each of the sides, right? From a candidate perspective, we understand it's a hard market right now, right? We know that there's more jobs, there's more choices on the menu than candidates know what to do with. So we are very much committed to making that process easy, but also we want to make meaningful connections along the way. We've actually just recently launched CoLab, which is a resource which allows candidates to type in their skills and what they're looking for from a pay perspective in their next career, and then make those meaningful matches with employers. And then on the employer side, we're continuing to invest to make sure that, again, we're matching qualified candidates to those jobs. And you can see, again, our marketplaces continue to grow. But again, we're so excited to share this research because not only do we hope that you take some of these tactical data points to drive strategy within your own organizations, but also use it as thought leadership information with your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love the partnership as well. And, I like to think of the partnership in terms of, celebrity couples. And if we were a celebrity couple, we'd be well beyond the average in terms of the length of this relationship and the commitment that you all have continued to bring to really educating the whole space and making that information available for CareerBuilder clients, CareerBuilder non-clients at no cost. But an important thing that both you and I know, nobody's on here to hear about Clearly Rated. Nobody's on here to hear about Career Builder. They want to hear about this research and about what's happening with job candidates in the space. So a little bit of a backdrop on this. If you have questions as we're going through here, we're going to go through each section, then take a little bit of a pause to answer questions from the group. So you can put those into the chat. You can put them into the Q&A tab as well. In addition, we're going to make these slides and a recording of this available to you after the presentation. So you have an ability to get that. So you don't have to feel like you have to try to screen grab things or jot things down. Our hope is that you take that energy and put it into engaging with your colleagues, with the peers online as a part of this today. And we go through here. So, our goal with this study was to really help understand, hey, what is happening now compared to what was happening in 2020. And we partnered with Career Builder and also with the American Staffing Association to really bring this information forward. And it was the biggest study that we've had in almost 5 years. We had almost 1,400 job candidates that participated. The majority were employed full-time, but we were looking also for those that were underemployed or that were looking for work and weren't currently employed there as a part of that. A really good mix. We look to aim to match this against the U.S. workforce as well. So let's jump into kind of, what does the job search look like in 2022? And we'll hit a few of the big pieces there as a part of this as well. So the first of which is looking at, just overall landscape. 67% said that they're satisfied with their current employment situation. That means that roughly a third, if you're doing the math at home, are dissatisfied. But in general, people are more satisfied, more optimistic than they were 2 years ago. Now, of course, 2 years ago was right at the start of the pandemic. So that's, to be expected. And in fact, we have still almost 2/3 that plan to be working at a different company within the next 12 months. But that's actually, believe it or not, lower than in 2020, when almost 80% actually said that that was what they thought was going to happen in the next 12 months. So there's a whole bunch of uncertainty. And that really colors sort of where we're at today, and especially where we were a couple of years ago. So we also asked them, what resources do you use in the job search? And not surprisingly, at the very top of that are the online job boards and the internet searches. But there's a couple of other things I kind of wanted to point at for everybody on this call. Staffing and recruiting agencies, that utilization is up at 36%, so over a third. That's higher than it has been in the past, where it's oftentimes been below 30%. But only less than 1 in 10 actually start their search with a staffing or recruiting agency. So what that means is that we really have to be everywhere and that our job candidates are, and we have to have compelling, consistent messaging across those. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that messaging is going to look like. The first thing that we wanted to look at was, hey, when you're considering a position, so for those on the call, as you're presenting a position, a temporary assignment specifically, or even a full-time permanent assignment with a company, what are the things that are at the top on that? And what was really interesting was job security was the number one thing. And this is really kind of counter to what we typically see. Normally, job security moves up, and this is beyond compensation, right? We know compensation typically is number one. But job security, normally in this type of a fire hot job market, we would not see job security up near this high. And then we see schedule flexibility, which has also moved up in prevalence as a part of that. We're going to talk some about the opportunity to work remotely. This is the first time that that's jumped up into the overall score at that high of a level. So there's a couple of things that have really fundamentally changed, and we'll talk about from a candidate standpoint why we think that those things have probably changed forever. Additionally, we asked this when you're considering a position, right? And we saw that there are some things that are more important when people are considering a position than they are once they're in a position and deciding whether to stay there. So for example, training and skills growth, the company's reputation, the company's mission and vision. So how I use this is I tell our staffing firms that, look, these are the types of things that you want to look at the job recs that you're taking. And if there's an argument that there's more job security there than there might be in other positions somebody is considering, play that up, right? If there's more schedule flexibility, if there's an opportunity for more training and skills growth, those are the types of things beyond compensation, which oftentimes we don't have as much control of, that we can really utilize to market a position to somebody that's considering. Now, why do they stay? Well, why do they stay? Again, top of that, job security, schedule flexibility as a component of it. But we start to see some things raise in importance, such as the positive impact of the work and the relationship with their direct manager. So again, as we're looking and we're probing with those that are passive job seekers, those are some things to kind of push with as well. 63% said that they've voluntarily left a position in the past. 23%, so 1 in 4, said that they've left in the last year. This is not surprising if you look at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics data on quits. The last 12 months, if you take any one of those months, more people quit in that month than any month in the prior 20 years. And so we've been quitting at a really, really rapid rate, right? And that's the great reshuffle, the great resignation, however you want to kind of talk about it. There's definitely been a lot of reshuffling, which ultimately is actually pretty good for our space. When we looked at why people voluntarily leave a position, there are some differences as you look at Gen Z and millennials versus baby boomers as a part of that. Gen Z and millennials, the number one thing that drives them, even beyond compensation, is that opportunity for growth opportunities as a part of that. On the baby boomer side, it's compensation first. Growth opportunities are in the middle there as a part of that. Gen X sort of falls kind of into the middle, sort of more similar to Gen Z and millennials, but not as much differentiated. So they kind of fall in that sort of normal path as a part of that. So that's a question that just came in. But I did want to draw people's attention to this. To help mental health, that was the number 2 reason across the board. Number 2 for Gen Z and millennials, number 2 for Gen Xers, and number 2 for the baby boomers as a part of this. And this is, again, something that is really interesting and new compared to what we've actually seen in the past as a part of that. So I want to start by bringing in Dave. I already see some good questions in the chat. We're going to get to those. But I want to start off with a question for you, Dave, which is, what surprised you in the data? I mean, you're out there living this probably closer than any of us on the call, because you're engaging with so many different recruiters, so many different staffing firms. Your whole team is coming back with sort of those experiences. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, Eric. I mean, I think that some of the things that you brought up, right, like the things that we don't traditionally see, like job security being at the top of the list, that's not something traditionally that maybe we're emphasizing as much, right, in the last couple of years, right? It's been remote, it's been flexibility. It was interesting to see that above, right? Obviously, I think the generational differences are important, right? I think that from a tactical perspective, we're seeing firms start to use some of that information and cater to different audiences, right? When we see, compensation not being necessarily as important when people are switching jobs in the younger generations. Obviously, for baby boomers, it's at the top of the list. It's very interesting to see that, but also the takeaways, what we're seeing and how we advise clients is to be aware of that when you have people in process. And again, if you see those different things within a job, knowing what to highlight to a particular audience is what's going to engage that candidate.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, one of the questions that came in through the chat that I think is a really good one is, how should staffing firms sort of message this out to clients, right? Especially around sort of the job security and things like that. Do you have a sense as to kind of how you sort of recommend that?
Yeah, hey, when you're having conversations with clients, right, and you're looking at that requisition, I think inquiring about those potential, leading with this data and saying this is what candidates care about. We know it's a candidate-driven market, right? Like there's 2 open jobs for every 1 active person looking. We know there's a lot of free agents, but they have a lot of choices. So we need to be front and center. What's most important to the candidate, and make sure that we're educating clients. And then they'll trust you, right? If you teach them something new, you have the data to back it up, they'll listen, and then make sure that, again, we're getting that information to the forefront when we're advertising the job.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the job rec is the time to do that. What we find is really interesting, and Dave, I've shared this with you before, but when we look at client satisfaction, one of the biggest drivers of client satisfaction is how consultative you are when you're taking the job rec. One of the biggest drivers of dissatisfaction is when you come back 3 weeks later and you haven't taken a good job rec, you haven't given that consultation up front, asked those questions, kind of shared and helped them sort of position their job within the market. When you come back 3 weeks later and you say, hey, we're not able to find somebody with 3 years experience like you wanted, it's going to be a year experience. When you're coming back 3 weeks later, it feels like you're making excuses. When you're doing it on the front end and you're sharing this data and you're sharing, hey, this is what we're seeing in the marketplace, that's when you're really at your most consultative. And it's probably one of the biggest misses that we see with recruiters is that oftentimes they don't sit there confidently knowing that they know more. They've been a part of more hires than that person sitting across from them 99 times out of 100, right? And they are the experts in the room, and they need to be able to take this information, this data, and confidently speak to that aspect of it as well. One of the things that came in here as well is a question about whether or not we think that's really a part of all the news around, inflation and a potential recession coming and things along those lines. If that's impacting it, I think it is. I think just there's been so much uncertainty in all of our lives over the last 2 years, economic and otherwise, that I think that's why we're seeing kind of that almost a little bit of a hangover effect and a little bit of a, hey, I still don't fully trust what the next 12 to 24 months have in store for me. I want to know that I can be here if I want to be here. Is that your take on it too?
Yeah, we're in a time that it's unknown, right? Like it's kind of the new normal, Eric, right? Coming out of the pandemic. And so people don't know what to expect. And there's a lot of information out there, a lot of misinformation. So it's again, the uncertainty is clear in the data, right? And I think you're 100% spot on.
Yeah. So we talk about this throughout the presentation. We'll have some more data on it. Remote work and flexibility. They both show up high, historically much higher than they did, say, pre-pandemic as a part of that. You've got some pretty interesting data on this as well that I continue to keep posting. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing when a job posting includes an opportunity for remote or flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, clearly candidates are telling us with their apply rates that they want remote work, right? When we look at our site, jobs that have remote work capability perform 6 times higher than ones that don't, right? But we totally understand that not every job that everybody is working has the ability to be remote, right? A lot of people need to be on site. So the next question is, well, okay, what can we highlight then? Well, we can highlight the schedule flexibility, right? Flexibility is next on that list, right? And really looking at different ways that we can highlight flexibility. If it's shift changes, if it's looking at potential ways to modify the work week, right? We're hearing a lot about that. And a lot of firms are really getting their customers to be able to flex on some of those things to get workers in the door and really appeal to what they're looking for. So yeah, it's very telling in the data.
Yeah, so let this question came in, and I'm curious about it as well. What kind of an impact do you see in apply rates if compensation is included in the post?
Yeah, compensation still king, right? So a lot of the data says, outside of compensation, these are the things candidates care about. Compensation, it's 11 times greater. We see the apply rates versus those that don't have it. Yep.
Yeah, that's great information. So now let's jump into a little bit about how they find and engage with staffing firms. So we kind of talk about that early piece of that. And we looked at what people trusted when vetting a staffing firm. So if they're going to utilize you, what are the things that they look at? And you can see referral is at or near the top there. And you can see online reviews, testimonials, all of these things play a big role. What I want people looking at this screen to take away is there's not one single thing that is going to drive this for you, right? You need to have a multifaceted approach as a part of that. And I also thought it was interesting why we showed it this way is that if somebody has utilized a staffing firm in the past, then they actually are much more likely to sort of trust the information that's coming from all of the sources about a potential staffing firm. And that's one of the things that our industry really has to overcome is that we've changed a lot in the last 10 years, the last 15 years, the last 20 years. And oftentimes the information that people have is pretty outdated. And so we can't go in and assume that people know all the things about our industry. We have to be able to go in and sort of re-educate them on the realities of what we do and the value that we bring to them as well. In fact, what we found is that about 22% said that they prefer the help of a staffing or recruiting firm. 59% said that they prefer to do it on their own, and 19% said they really didn't know or they had no preference. Those that did want to partner with the staffing firm is because they perceived that you all had access to jobs that they didn't. That you could help them kind of tailor that job search, and that you really understood the employment market better than they did as a part of that. And there was a question earlier on how to read these charts, so I'll just say it here. What we're seeing here as an example is that 62% said that this was one of the three reasons that they like using a staffing firm. 33% said it was the number one reason why they liked using a staffing firm. So that's sort of the way to read and interpret those as a part of that. We also thought we would look at, okay, what are some of the things that really impact people? And you can see here we have Gen Z and millennials, Gen X, that pretty much operate the same, but oftentimes quite a bit of difference when you look at the differences there between the baby boomers as a part of this. And just to kind of give you an idea, if you don't know this about your firm already, we've run this for a couple of different firms. What we find is that typically about 70% of those being hired for temporary positions are Gen Y or younger as a part of that. Now, we know you've probably heard me say this ad nauseum before, that Gen Y is the largest generation in the workforce. By 2029, Gen Y and younger is going to be almost 2/3 of the workforce. They're almost half the workforce today. So we need to really understand those differences and continue to track to those differences. However, when we look at the sort of staffing firm temporary placement, at least the studies that we've done, it's been up in the 65 to 75% range today. So you really need to understand that millennial and younger job applicant as a part of it. So a couple things that are really resonate. Help make sure you get paid on time, ease the burden of searching for and applying for jobs. What I like about this, and allows the flexibility, what I like about this is that you're really essentially saying, hey, we hear a lot about the gig economy and job candidate. You're probably hearing a lot about that. What if you could have that type of flexibility, but you didn't have to worry about the two biggest pain points of being an independent contractor, which is making sure you get paid on time and trying to find that next gig, right? That's really where I think there's a huge opportunity for those that already have decided that traditional permanent full-time employment is not for them. We can ease the pieces of this that matter the most to them. And then when you look at sort of the testimonials and the star ratings, what we see is that Gen Z and Gen Z and Gen Y much more likely to say that those are really important and influential for them as a part of it. So Dave, there's already a bunch more questions coming in. So I'll kick it off with mine, but then I want to make sure that we continue to get to the chat questions because they're honestly really good. So if you've used a staffing firm in the past, you have a much higher likelihood of using one again, and you tend to trust what the recruiters say. What are some things that you see and your team see as you kind of sit side by side with recruiters trying to help them understand their process? What are some things that really help them build trust, and what are some things that maybe erode trust?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is, making sure that you're understanding your talent, right? And the biggest thing about building these relationships, the firms that we sit side by side with really do a good job of taking that consultative approach, right? Like you talked about some of the things that the younger generation cares about, and it's not necessarily traditionally what we prioritize as kind of the most important in the industry, right? So it's important to take some of those things to heart and recognize that, hey, we've got candidates in the younger generation that might not necessarily think compensation is at the top of the list, right? Again, the topic of mental health becoming more and more prevalent in the research that we're seeing is something that they want to consider, but also, again, the schedule flexibility, the ability to work remote, a lot of those things, I think, again, on the front end, the firms that are taking the consultative approach to be able to service that segment of the space has seen more, being able to build that trust a little bit quicker. But again, I think that where we've seen the misses are we're placing people on assignment that they didn't have the expectation of what that job was, right? We misrepresented the requisition. We didn't truly understand what the candidate's needs were. And then when they get on assignment or they're placed at the organization, it's not what they expected, right? So I think that, again, the way to bridge that gap is just being more consultative up front, listening and understanding what your talent is looking for. And then, again, making sure that we're matching them to the right opportunities, right? Because we know employers that aren't doing the things that again are going to adhere to what our top talent wants, right? So we've got to also be selective in that regard.
Yeah, you said a couple of things that really stand out to me. The first of which is sort of the expectation management at the start of the assignment. And we run what we call our talent experience program, and it automates a survey out at onboarding, at mid assignment, and at end of assignment. And at onboarding, that's the biggest miss, right, is a part of that. And that's important because when we've done this analysis in the past, what we found is that almost half of all turnover happens in that first 2 weeks. And so it's kind of this binary. Was this what I expected, or was it not? And if it was, then I love you, staffing firm, because I'm very keen on the fact that I have this position in part because of you. If not, you become the villain very, very quickly as a part of that. And then the other thing that I think came up in the chat, and kind of heard you talk about that as well, is sort of the transparency and the willingness to really engage at that level. And one of the other mistakes that we see with recruiters a lot of time is that they only really focus on the things that are the outcome. And so they'll say, hey, I've got you this interview. Or, hey, I've got this opportunity that I think might be interesting to you. When in reality, if you ask that recruiter to dig in, they would say, oh, actually, yeah, I actually looked at a handful of different opportunities, and this one really met with what they said that they wanted as a part of that. Well, you're not getting any credit for any of that, right? We operate in this big black box on both the candidate and the client side, where the order comes in and the client never sees what happens until we present a slate of candidates. The candidate engages with us, has an interview. They have no idea what we're doing on their behalf. And then they either found a position that they're excited about or not. So we have to do a better job of getting credit for all the things that we're doing on them, on their behalf as a part of it. Some of the claims that resonate a lot, I talked about sort of the sort of gig economy and sort of how to do that. Do you see that as an opportunity for staffing firms? Because I feel like this is one of the biggest areas where, from a positioning to job candidate standpoint, it's so clear, right? They know all the things that they think that they like about the gig economy, and we know all the things that are the painful parts about that, right? So the ability to say, hey, here's your opportunity to do new things, challenging things in a manner that works for you, but we'll take care of the part that you don't like, finding that next gig, getting you paid on time, things along those lines. What are your thoughts on that in terms of the opportunities going forward there?
Yeah, 100%, Eric. I'm just seeing in the chat, right? A lot about building relationships, building trust. I think one important piece, right, is the differentiator that we see why, the candidates that continue to use staffing firms, why they come back is, right, they rely on that expertise. We know that finding a job can be stressful. There's a lot of, again, different choices that they can go and choose from, and they rely on the firm and their expert in the relationship with their staffing partner to help them navigate that, right? And it's not just finding the job, but also, you mentioned, like, along that process, like constant communication, interview follow-up, even when they go on assignment, like coaching and feedback consistently throughout the assignment. I feel like that's where a lot of firms miss. And when we talk about building strong relationships that are going to last, those things are very important. Yeah. And a differentiator, right, to the gig economy.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the ways, that if you really buy into that, and I do, that one of the things that they're looking for is essentially that we can make them more marketable, right? That if they're going to engage with staffing firm A, it's because they think that they're going to have a better shot at getting a job and sort of the next phase of their career that they're really excited about. So what are some things that you've seen work well to show, that kind of value and to make them more marketable as job candidates?
Well, I think recognizing what that candidate's bringing to the table in terms of their skill set, right? Like, they might not necessarily know what the next job title is or what the next career path is, and you can help educate them on that, right? In terms of the access to the amount of jobs. Like, one of the things we saw in the data is, a lot of the firms have access to more jobs that I didn't even know about, right? And I think that understanding what their skills are, there's transferable skills to other job types that you can open candidates' eyes to. I think that's a really important aspect of it. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. So let's go into the actual satisfaction. What we see here is, we have been tracking this on the candidate side since 2010. And you can see here as we go through there, it's up from 19%, up just a point. So pretty much sort of level with that part of it. But it's pretty interesting when you look at it by generation. Gen X is most satisfied. Gen Z is least satisfied. But also by the size of the staffing firm. So actually the large nationals and the smaller local staffing firms had higher talent scores in this particular survey. A little bit higher if you're male versus female. So there's a DE&I component. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then by the length of the current assignment as a part of that. So it's sort of interesting as we kind of, look at some of those differences. And then I know, and I'll go through this quick because I mainly want people to have this as a benchmark in what we send out post survey. But it also matters a lot by what sector you're in. Being in healthcare, being in a physical office environment in these last couple of years has not been a great place to be. You can see that reflected in their scores versus the tech, IT, or professional that tend to have higher scores as a part of that. And then you can see as well, the scores tend to go up, how people rate their staffing firm based on sort of the level of the type of job that they're going for as a part of that. So let's go in. This is a little bit busy, but I kind of want to draw your attention to a couple of different things here. This is asked, how they would rate each of these aspects of the firm that they worked with. And you can see the customer service experience, their success finding work with the firm, right? So this is the key outcome. And you can see, 47% said very good. What's interesting here is that, their NPS, if they said that, is definitely higher. But it's even higher based on their perception of the quality of the positions that you offer. So even if you can't find them a job, right, even if they don't get hired, there's all these other things that actually have a huge impact, almost as big as finding them a job as a part of that. And we saw this come up in the chat, Dave, and you mentioned as well, when communication goes sideways, negative 34% net promoter score. When they come across as not caring or not professional, negative 37% net promoter score. And again, net promoter score, for those that don't know, is simply how likely are you to recommend this staffing firm to a friend or colleague. It can go from positive 100, which is everybody gives you a 9 or a 10, they're all promoters, to negative 100, which is everybody is a detractor, which is a score of 0 to 6 as a part of that. Now, so when you get in the negative, what that means is that, hey, you've got more detractors, more people that are upset if they said, that this wasn't good, than you do people that are promoters as a part of that. So it's really important to kind of see how those aspects of it are really impacting the overall score. And this is one of the ones, and I saw this show in the chat, and I had to hold my tongue because I knew the data was coming. But for the person that put this into the chat, you definitely get the Nostradamus award so far of the webinar. You're exactly right. Getting to know them as a person, a huge impact on NPS. In fact, the biggest impact on NPS is if they feel like they were treated not as a number, but as a human being who had specific requests, if they felt like those were heard and acted on in a appropriate way, those are all really, really positives as a part of that. Now this, we talk a lot about rehire. And in fact, a lot of the people that are doing the end of assignment surveys, it's in large part to really get the visibility and the accountability to impact that rehire number. And I will tell you, as an industry, and Dave, you and I've we've talked about this probably multiple times. It is one of the biggest areas that I think we sort of accept a higher number than we should as an industry on sort of the low percentage that are going to be actually rehired into the program. And part of the problem here is right down in this section. 70% said that someone had contacted them prior to the end of the assignment. Now, I'm not great at math, but that means that 30% were never even contacted at the end of the assignment. When we work with some of the best and the ones that have the highest rehire rates, that number is up around 95% of those that believe that they got contacted before the end of that. And you can see the impact that it has, right? So not only are we not doing it, it's impacting rehire negatively, we're also undoing so much goodwill that we had throughout that entire program. The way that I describe it to people is, look, it hurts a little bit if you're single and you ask somebody out on a date and they say, no, thank you, I'm not interested. It hurts a lot worse if you went out with that person for 5 dates, you thought everything was perfect, you're planning your wedding, you're in love, you're telling all your friends this is the one, and then all of a sudden they just stop calling you or texting you and engaging with you. That hurts way worse, right? And that's essentially what we're doing when we put somebody on an assignment. Presumably they complete it successfully, and then we aren't there to sort of actively engage in whatever that transition is, hopefully to another assignment. A huge impact on gross margin as well, right? Because we've already paid the background check, the drug check. We've done references with them. They're actually less likely to turn over because we've already placed them once. And so we know that they have a relationship with us. We have a relationship with them. There's so many reasons to really focus on that rehire. We have a lot of people focusing on retention. We have fewer focusing on rehire. So we need people to really line in on both of those metrics because they're both really, really important. So when people have a service issue, oftentimes it's that they feel like there aren't enough positions available, which really is another way of saying, like, I didn't feel like the positions I was excited about or I matched was really going to do that. But you can see a lot of other things here too. Slow responsiveness, the technology stack that you utilize is important. And then this is coming down to that poor communications, almost like the chat group wrote the slide deck for me. Look at the difference in NPS if they said that there were no issues with communication versus if there were issues with communication as a part of that. And the same when we look at sort of that perception of the unprofessionalism of the staff as a part of that. So as we jump in here, I want to kind of open up for discussion again. We saw satisfactions, significantly lower with Gen Z and to a lesser extent Gen Y. This is a really big deal for staffing firms, right? This is the market that we primarily place. What do you think are some of the reasons that are kind of showing up those discrepancies in that score?
Yeah, I mean, Eric, I think that, when we look at the NPS, right, seeing the numbers down, I think the positive here is these are all the information that we gathered from the data, and my thoughts are they're all things we can control, right? When we talk about communication throughout the process, it's so important, imperative, and I think that, again, I've seen it a lot in the chat, right? Like when you provide a good experience, right, you're constantly communicating, you're following up, you're following through, you're building stronger relationships, and that can exponentially help your business, not only in a rehire, but also getting referrals, right, later on down the road. Because I know when we talk to firms and we look at kind of where the number one source of placement comes from, it's typically that referral source, right? And so the more we can impact that, I think the data is really positive because they're all things that we can control. And if we just make a couple of tweaks, we can really exponentially help our business in that regard.
We have a question in the chat of, what have we found in guarantees of candidates staying by the recruiter as a client expectation? I think what they're saying is, where we're sort of telling the client that we, guarantee that this person will stay. I've not seen much of that in this job market. I think that's an unrealistic expectation for a client to put on a staffing firm. What I have seen is people getting a lot more creative about retention bonuses. Are you seeing that as well? Retention bonuses paid out to talent for reaching key milestones along that path?
Yep. Different incentives offered throughout the process, right? Whether it's a retention bonus or some sort of stipend there to make sure that person stays 100%. But I mean, it's hard to offer a guarantee in this market, let alone, I mean, we know that we have the most unpredictable beings on the planet that we deal with human beings, right? Yeah. So it's really hard to guarantee in this space.
Yeah, we've seen people, especially in sort of the professional and in the IT and the healthcare space, but even in kind of the commercial side, we're seeing people start to play around with this. And the one piece of advice that I would give you is that if you're going to do it, set it up as a number, right? And then dangle that number right at the start. Hey, when you get to 3 months, you're going to get a $2,000 bonus, because what happens there is that you tap into the psychology of the loss aversion, right? And so then if they take another position, they feel like they've already got that 2,000 and now they're going to lose it as a part of it. So as you're looking at that, that's what I would do. I wouldn't set it out really far. I think you're better off saying, here's $2,000 at 3 months and here's $4,000 at 6 months, or whatever those numbers actually work out to be. I think you're better off doing that, but paint that picture early in the process so that they're feeling that loss if they do leave and go to another assignment. Area that we really love to talk about, DE&I. I know Career Builder's done a bunch on this. We've done a bunch on this as well for internal staff. But now let's talk about it from a job candidate standpoint. And we ask people, hey, how important is it that a staffing firm exhibits, diversity by race, gender, sexuality, has a clear emphasis on DE&I. Firm leaders are active in programs to create opportunities for underrepresented populations. And you can see here, again, 39% said it was extremely important. 78% said it was either somewhat or extremely important as a part of that. So that's how you read that chart. So what we're seeing there is, okay, this is a huge deal. And in fact, it is a huge deal. It's an even more huge deal when you look at really Gen Y and younger, but even Gen X is a part of that. This is a big difference in terms of what is expected. And this is just the evolution of what we expect from an employer, right? Or somebody that we engage with. It happens to be, the context of what we all are sort of grown up with and what we've seen and what we've come to expect. But it's really, really impactful, right? That's the percent that think it's extremely important. About half believe that that's really important. So that's going to be a big deal for your staffing firm to feel like you're, able to tell a good story in that realm. And it's important, right, for your staffing firm to just be doing that. In fact, also the assignments that you might be placing them on, the end employer, right, your client, we should be holding them accountable as well, because if they don't have a good story, then it's much harder for us to place people in there. It's much harder for us to get people retained on those positions as well. So again, very important for candidates today to see, not that you're perfect, nobody is, right? Not that you've arrived, because you never will, but that you are on this journey and that you're making progress and that it matters to you. In fact, if we asked it, we said, hey, if you think that your staffing firm is behind or just on par with other firms, NPS was a 13%, and about half said that they're very likely to use the firm again. If they think that your firm's ahead in that regard, 45% NPS and 3 out of 4 are very likely to use your firm again. What's interesting is that that's not just your female candidates. That's not just your minority candidates or those that identify as LGBTQIA plus or something along those lines. That's literally across everybody in this study. That's the difference that we have there. So it's a really important thing. And again, is becoming more and more important as a part of that. We asked them specifically, is it more important now than it was, in early 2020, pre-pandemic? 82% agreed that it was more important. And you can see, again, similar across the generations, but there is a generational component of that as well. So I want to be talking about this. We already have a couple of really good questions in here that won't be easy. The softball questions for you and I, Dave, are done. So I'll give you an easier one to start with, right? Which is that there's very few silver linings around COVID-19, right? It's disproportionately impacted BIPOC employees, female employees, but there are some silver linings. And one of them is that I do believe the data suggests, and we're seeing evidence that this DE&I progress is happening in a more consistent gait than it was before. So how are you seeing DE&I impact searches? What are you guys doing to help staffing firms, really kind of answer that question? Yes, we can increase the diversity in your talent pool, and here's how we do it.
Yeah, Eric, thanks for asking. I mean, it's something we're very passionate about at Career Builder, right? I mean, you can see it in a lot of the partnerships that we've gone into. You can see it embedded in our culture, right? I think that this is something, again, like you said, we've seen it become more and more prevalent, right, since the emergence of COVID. But if you look at Career Builder, we recently launched the Black Information Network partnership with iHeartRadio. We're actually going to bring 100,000 careers to Black Americans across the U.S. And any of our customers that advertise on Career Builder and post their jobs are going to get access to that audience, right? I think that, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, making sure as well, like just some thoughts that I had, right? We recognize candidates. We know it's important to them from the most recent data, but we also know how many different resources they're using as they're going through that process to vet a firm. You need to make sure that it's embedded in your culture and it's front and center in all those different mediums, right? Do you have that prevalent on your social pages, right? On your website and everything that you're doing, and even the representation at your organization, right? Are they talking about it? Are they talking about culturally some of the things that you're doing? Because that's what candidates care about. It's something that's a priority, and especially when we look at that younger generation, the perception in the space, it's a key opportunity for differentiation. No question.
Yeah. So the question that I think is a really good one and also not an easy one. In fact, I'll answer it first since it is a challenging one, but I would love to get your thoughts on this too. Isn't it risky for staffing company leaders to speak out on key social issues? And already in the chat, we have a couple of points that I think are really well made, which is yes. And it's also risky to not speak out because silence is a form of speaking out in this manner as well. I will say, and Dave's in the same boat too, right? We're both leaders of our company, and it's a constant challenge of trying to figure out how to show support and what sort of gets said as a company or as a company leader versus me and my personal life as a part of that. The only advice I will tell you is, as we continue to wrestle with it as well, is that there is a really important aspect of being a part of these conversations. And I think that the days where we might have been able to sort of just say, hey, that's a business related topic and that has nothing to do with our business. Personally, I might feel a certain way, but I'm not going to share that. I feel like that's not really, as we move forward, going to be an opportunity. Dave, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I mean, hey, Eric, it's hard to ignore a lot of the things that are going on. I think that, again, looking back and just something that I'm very passionate about and career builder as well is just, again, a lot of this that's going on around mental health and making sure that, again, your team and your employees have the resources available and the outlets to go and talk to people about some of the things that they're feeling emotionally, right? And I think that also is an acknowledgement of what's going on without being silent, and you're also helping your employee base, right? I think that that's something to consider, and it's again definitely a priority of ours at Career Builder.
Yeah, great advice. We could spend the entire rest of the time just talking about that topic, which I think is really important. But I want to make sure that we get to this remote work and flexibility with the time that we have left. So we asked people, hey, compared to early 2020, pre-pandemic, is it more important to do something you love? 92% said it was. More important that your work have purpose? 90% said it was. Have a strong workplace culture? 83%. Feel more invested in their career? 75%. And what we see when we actually look at this by generation is actually not that much different, right? This is one of the few places where really generationally we see a pretty consistent story across most of these. So it is people are engaged in a different way with work. We found that working remotely 3.8 times more desirable now than it was pre-pandemic. Full-time permanent job 3.6 times. Working as full-time independent contractor 1.9 times. 40% less desirable to be working a full-time temporary assignment through a staffing agency. So this is where we bring it up because this is important, right? And it's very different based on whether they've used a staffing firm or have not used a staffing firm as a part of that as well. But we have to combat this, right? Because our job candidates are thinking through this. So when we bring them a temporary assignment, we have to assume that they're going to view that somewhat more skeptically than if we bring them a full-time permanent direct hire position, things along those lines. That's always been the case, but it's more so now than it was pre-pandemic. And you can see sort of the interest in working remotely is pretty universal across there. So we'll kind of jump into that a little bit further. What we found, which is interesting, this is two studies that found this exact number. About 30% of the people said that they were working remotely currently as a part of that. And you can see there's big differences by sector. Obviously, it's hard to do that in healthcare for a lot of the positions, industrial for a lot of the positions. And so it's not surprising to see that tech and professional have higher levels of remote work as a part of that. And this is really important for you to understand too, the candidate remote work preferences. And again, as Dave said earlier, if you look at the BLS data, there's roughly 2 job openings for every person who is unemployed and looking for a job. That means that there's a lot of control for the job candidates still. That may be changing, but as of right now, there's a lot of control for the job candidates as a part of that. You can see, being able to work remotely and being able to work remotely full time is a big part of this. When we asked hiring managers, what we found is roughly 1 in 4 said that they're going to allow full-time remote work. And roughly 1 in 4 said that they're going to require people to work from the office full time. And so again, there's a little bit of a mismatch between what our clients are offering versus what job candidates want as well. So it's another great place for us to consult with them and to really ask them, does this position really need to be in the office? Does this position really need to be in the same geography? Because our access to talent is much larger if those two things aren't true. Maybe that they are true and we can work with that. But if that's not true, we should know that and we should explore that. Asking job candidates, the majority think that they're more productive working at home. Just 11% think that they're less productive. When you look at hiring managers, it's still, about the 4 and 5 think that they're as productive working remotely or more productive working remotely. But there is a bigger jump, right? Almost twice as many actually think that they're less productive working remotely. So those are some of the perceptions, right? And perception is reality for a job candidate. And perception is also reality for your clients. So those are the perceptions that exist out there as we kind of navigate this remote work component of it as well. When we looked at the upsides, job candidates said that they're more relaxed, not commuting was helpful for that as a part of it. And then when we looked at the downside, getting to know people at the company and sort of fighting the feelings of loneliness or depression, those are the two most often listed as a part of it. So as you're again going in, and we'll send out this slide deck so you can spend more time with it. This is great information to bring with your clients. Many of your clients are trying to figure out remote work here right alongside of you, trying to figure out how to do that and do that effectively. If you can really bring in and say, hey, here's the most often positive things that people say working remotely, and here's the most often negative things that they say about working remotely, you're really adding a lot of value to them as a part of it. So 43% of employees that are working full-time permanent jobs right now say that they feel burnt out or overworked as a part of that. And then you can see by generation, Gen Z and younger are more likely to feel that way. But what we see there as well is that in the red, if they say that they're burnt out, they're much more likely to be actively looking for a job. They're about the same to be willing to consider it. And you can see the impact that that has. So what that means for us is that we have a real opportunity here to go in and say, hey, if your team is feeling burnt out, if they feel like they're getting stretched to a point they don't have the skills to be successful, or they have too much of a workload, that is a perfect time to engage somebody on a temporary assignment, right? To fill in skills that you don't already have and actually provide the ability for the team that you have to grow those skills, to match that and learn from that person, and to add additional workload so that you can flex up and flex down. That's a really important component of what we do. Speaking of flexibility, I wanted to end with this, which is we have a lot of things and people kind of go and they turn off and they say, look, we can't do flexible, right? We can't do flexible. We're in a warehouse environment. We can't do that. Well, we ask candidates what types of flexibility they would find valuable. And you can see there's a lot of things that maybe your clients haven't gotten creative about yet. Flexible start and end times, compressed work week, increased schedule flexibility for parents or part-time schedules. There's a lot of things that we kind of take for granted that, hey, this is a 9 to 5 position, or this is an 8 to 5 position, or whatever it is, that maybe we can challenge a little bit more and say, okay, is there a possibility to give people an opportunity to choose an 8 o'clock start time or a 9 o'clock start time? For parents, a 9 o'clock start time works a million times better as a part of that. So maybe there's an opportunity to do something like that as you go in there as a part of that. So with that, we have about 7 minutes. I know we have a couple questions in here that are really, really good. But I want to start, Dave, with kind of your perception. These numbers around burnout, as I said, are a huge opportunity for staffing firms. What else stood out for you as opportunities for staffing firms around flexibility and remote work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a huge education gap with regards to, if you look at the data in terms of what candidates want, what we're able to offer. I think that really from an education standpoint, this could really help with your clients, right? If they have the ability to work remote, really making the job a little bit more attractive, I think is important, right? And you have some data and some information to help you there. I think the flexibility piece, right? Like we're seeing a lot of clients, especially in the blue collar jobs, light industrial, where people don't have the ability to go remote. What else can we do? I think that there's some really good thoughts around how you can get creative with schedule flexibility and potentially looking at 4-day work weeks, maybe a later start time. I think that all those points are super important, or they're also creative and things that you can bring to your clients that maybe they're not considering today to address the burnout.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the questions that came in that you might have an answer to, what percentage of jobs posted list remote work? You talked about the lift on that, but do you have any sense as to where that number sits? Maybe not an exact number, but even just kind of a ballpark figure?
I mean, the highest volume of jobs that we have available right now are in the light industrial space, right?
Yeah.
Light industrial and healthcare. Like if you look at the highest volume, some of the highest growing occupations, just where the demand, I mean, it's across the board, but a lot of the professional jobs are the ones where we see that are more remote, right? Consistent with kind of the number of people that are working full time, roughly 30% of the jobs. But most of them, right, if we look at some of the low skilled, again, leisure hospitality as well, highest volume of jobs, like they have to be in person. They don't have the ability to work remote. So still a majority of the jobs don't have the flexibility to offer the remote, but they do have the ability to offer some of the other flexibility things that you highlighted.
Yeah, I think, and I asked in the chat what percentage of their temporary assignments people are actually placing remotely now, and you can see it sort of all over the board as a part of that. And I think that we're going to see that continue for a while, right? And I think the biggest thing that I would say is whether it's for your internal staff positions or whether it's for the positions that you're placing externally, the challenges of remote work are very real. Also, the challenges of trying to get people to come in the office, if the type of job they could do from home, also very real, right? And so, to me, I'll take the increased applicant pool and the increased retention and try to figure out how to make remote work work for myself and for our team here as a part of that. I think there's a lot of staffing firms that are kind of making that same choice, but certainly not all of them. There's a lot of them that are in the office and really believe that that's what they want, and honestly a lot of employees that sort of are gravitating there as well. So there's no single solution that is going to handle every aspect of this as a part of it. So another thing that I think is pretty interesting is that what we're seeing from job candidates really dovetails with what we've seen with internal employees as well. You get to see how people have shifted on this with their internal staff. The people that are doing it well, are they doing anything unique that the rest can learn from? And what have you learned from them?
Yeah, I think that from a lot of firms that I talk to that have been able to do it well and have had the highest retention rates, offer some sort of flexibility with regards to remote work, right? When we're talking about internal staff, and it's some sort of hybrid model. It's not all remote, or we're mandating that you go into the office, but there's some sort of hybrid model where you're encouraging people to come into the office. I mean, it's something that we're doing at Career Builder as well. It's more encouragement to get into the office, but not necessarily one way or the other, right? It's a hybrid, something in the middle, and I feel like that's kind of where we've started to land, and it's what I'm hearing has been successful for a lot of firms.
Yeah, I tease people a little bit because the data, depending on what argument you're trying to make, you can make the data tell the story for you. I could either tell you, that more than 80% of people want to work remotely, and that's true, right? They want to work remotely at least 1 day a week, 2 days a week, all the way up to full time. I could also tell you that more than 80% of people want to be in the office at least a day a week, and that's also true, right? Because that hybrid piece is a big part of it. And as Amber put in the chat, it really is about having that flexibility of choice if you can, and not everybody can, but having that flexibility of choice is going to be just another aspect as people look at the overall employment value, right? It's just a big piece of that. And what's interesting is whether it's internal staff or whether it's people we're placing on assignment, it's just a much broader view of how people add up the entire value of their employment solution, right? It used to be maybe compensation and training and development and traditional benefits as a part of that. And now it's compensation and flexibility and security and where do I align with the mission and vision, and do I align with the leadership stance on social issues, and do I have flexibility, and do I have remote work? And again, it's just, you need to recognize that job candidates want flexibility and they want remote work. If you can't, or you're not doing that, you're going to have to amp up some other aspect of that employment solution. Maybe it's your culture, maybe it's the compensation, maybe it's how quickly they can progress in their career. But it's just, again, it's just a juggling act to try to get to a total number in the minds of the candidates that's higher than what they could be doing somewhere else. So it's a big challenge. With that, I want to be cognizant of time. We're right at time. Dave, thank you so much for continuing to support this project that we're both so passionate about. And to everybody on the call, this is actually the biggest turnout we've had for presenting this data. Stay tuned, because we'll be providing data from the client perspective as we come later in the year here as well. So there'll be some other great data coming out from Career Builder, the American Staffing Association, and Clearly Rated. Have a wonderful day. Expect to see the slides and a recording of this sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you.